Werewolf in Charlotte panel. So if you will please help me welcome David Naughton and Vic Armstrong to the stage.
Hi, I'm Vic Armstrong.
And I'm David Nörd.
Thanks for waiting. Were you guys waiting for us?
Yes!
Well, we kind of just found out about it. We're doing a panel. So here we are. Does that light have to be on? Are you recording this? That center light? Because it's going to be nice to see who we're talking to. But if they turn that light off, could you not see us? Is that the idea? This is going to be one of those, we talk and you talk too, okay? All right, well, let me start off by just giving you a couple of things about American Werewolf in London, or in Charlotte, as the case may be. We could go straight to questions, or I could just, I'll give you a couple of things that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't heard of about this movie. Obviously, it's a film that was shot and released in 1981, which is a kind of an interesting thing in and of itself. The movie was written by John Landis when he was about 21 years old, and he had this whole idea about werewolves. So it was one of those films that he had pitched years before he got a chance to make it. So when he actually, after the success of Animal House and the Blues Brothers, John could do anything he wanted to do at Universal. And so he decided to do, well, I'm going to do my werewolf movie. And he shopped it around town in Hollywood, and nobody wanted to do it. So he finally, on his own, went out and said, I'll raise the money for this movie. And they said, okay, but you have to deliver it. It was called a negative pickup, which means he'll go out and shoot the movie and deliver it and then get paid for it. It's an interesting way to make a film. But, well, of course, when you shop a script around, then other studios start getting wind of what other studios are going to be doing that film, and so the whole idea of werewolves got popular again, I should say. And so there was a sort of a rush. After all these years of him having done the script, he finally got a chance to do it. Now he had to rush to make it and get it out because there were other films coming out as well. So what he did was he had to cast it. He had to cast it right away because his buddy, Rick Baker, he had done a really small film called Schlock. Is anybody familiar with that film?
Yes.
Of course. That's where they met. And John tells a funny story about meeting Rick, who was baking heads in his mother's oven, making molds. And that's how they met when they were like in high school age, or just after high school. So, and they had promised to do this film if they ever got it to be done. They were going to do their werewolf movie. So along comes the fall of 1980. John gets supposedly the green light. He has to raise this money. But the first thing he has to do is cast his two guys. So he went, to the usual places in New York and LA. And I had a chance to meet him because of these commercials that I had been doing that he was familiar with. And so I literally went into his office, sat down, and we talked about, have I ever been to England? Yes. I had studied acting in London at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and during the course of my 2 years at that drama school, I'd taken a bike tour on a backpack on my own through Western England and into Wales. And he thought that was cool. He says, well, I've got a little movie where there's two guys on a backpack, and they're from New York. I said, well, I'm from Connecticut. So long and short of it, he goes, here's my number, read this, call me tomorrow. Well, what do you mean call you tomorrow? That's not how it's not done that way in casting. So the next day I read the script, which was pretty amazing. I still have that script. And called him the next day and he says, so do you want to be a werewolf? He says, and I said, yeah. He says, okay, you got to get right over to Rick Baker. So I went over to Rick Baker, who had this little shop in San Fernando Valley, which is part of the Los Angeles community. And he had these young guys, kids, that really hadn't done anything before, with Rick at the helm, and we began to do the special makeup. What that entailed was having to do molds of my arms and my legs, torso, head, things that I just didn't know what I was getting into. And if it's pretty well pretty familiar now, people that have studied the makeup effects, but if you've ever had molds of your teeth done, you know, it's a quick drying alginate, it's a fast drying cement. Well, imagine that, a big vat of it, and you have to stick your whole arm in it until it starts to harden, and then you pull your arm out, and that's the mold that they have to make actual replica of my arm. Well, that's fine with arms and legs, but when you do your head, it's a whole different story. You're in there, and they're putting this plaster. It's not plaster, it's this fast-drying alginate. And it's, you know, I don't recommend it. It's a little, claustrophobic. You can't breathe. You can basically, you get an air supply either through your mouth with a straw or one in your nose as a straw. And you're inside this mold until it dries, and then they take it out. They go, okay, we're going to do another one. Can you do another one? And you know, then 30 years ago, I was going, yeah, I can do another one. So we did about 5 of those. And that's the preliminary makeup. A couple of months later, that was October. February, we're all on a plane going to London. John had been over there, scouted the locations. We shot the film in about 10 weeks. Vic will tell you about what he had to do in it. And we finished around about the end of March, I was saying, in 1981, and it was released around April 13th, 1981. That's the beginning. Vic?
Thank you. I'm not sure I could be quite as eloquent as David, but my involvement with American Werewolf in London, I was called in by a pal of mine called Alf Joint. We did Bridge Too Far, Superman 1 and 2 together, and he'd worked with John Landis on a picture called Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia, when John was just bumming around trying to get into the film business and everything else, and he kept telling my pal Alf about this movie, this script he had. Anyway, cut to years later, that was in like 67, 68, cut to years and years later, he calls Alf and says, hey, it's John again. And oh, hi. And I got my movie off the ground, and the rest is history. He called Alf in, Alf called me in, we were partners, we used to work together. And our main sort of input on that show, although I played the Nazi werewolf, etc., and all the other stunts in the movie, our main big stunt thing to organise, which was huge, and I don't think you could do it to this day again, was the bus doing the 180 in Piccadilly when the werewolf runs out of the movie theatre, and there's 24 cars all simultaneously key off each other and crash. And we rehearsed this sequence. We built a replica of Piccadilly Circus and a place called Brooklands, where the old banked racetrack was in the 20s in England. And we had bales of hay marking every corner, every traffic bollard, every traffic light. And if people were waiting in the side streets for their cue, I drove the bus, I was the bus driver as well in it. When I threw my 180 with the bus, that cued them to come out, or they'd queued off another car, we'd blindfold them or hide their sight of vision so that on the night there was no surprises, they weren't cheating, as it were, during rehearsals. And the police would not give us permission to shut down the whole of Piccadilly because they'd had a terrible experience years before with Michael Winner, who had that reputation. And they said, what we can do, if you do it at 2 or 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, early in the morning, or Sunday early in the morning, we'll let you shut the road with your cars with their flashing lights on, but we can't officially let you shut it. And you cannot damage the road with your cars crashing and exploding and everything else. So that's what we did. We had wrecking crews waiting up every alleyway, and when I came up Piccadilly and threw the 180 with a bus, which was a feat on its own to get a London double-decker to do a 180-degree spin, the cars just smashed, but within 2.5 minutes of us stopping the road, we had the road open again and traffic was running through. We did it on 2 consecutive weekends. And then we built replicas of a lot of the storefronts of Piccadilly in the studio, and we did inserts, because that was all shot with like 6 or 8 cameras as masters from all over around Piccadilly. Then we went in and did inserts of various things, and John Landis, I'm sure as you know, loves to do a Hitchcock-esque type appearance in his own movies, and I actually drove the car that rammed John through the travel agent's window, smashed the window, and so I'm sitting there revving the engine waiting to go and think, this is it, this is the end of my career where I kill the director of the movie. But it was great. John was a fantastic leader. I remember him drinking tab all the time. Yeah.
Oh, constantly. But you know, wasn't it also the stunt in Piccadilly? Wasn't it just before dawn? I seem to recall 5 or 6 in the morning. And what was cool is
exactly.
we knew, I mean, Griffin and I, we knew this incredible stunt was going to happen. Nobody else did, I mean, except the people in the film. So it was really like stealing a scene in the sense of capturing it in a real location. So we were all there, oh, you going to stay up tonight to see it? Yeah, I'm going to try to. Well, we got to work tomorrow. No, well, got to see the stunt. And what was so amazing was it happened, and then it was gone, and then the streets were open, as Vic said, as if it had never happened, all in about 2.5, 3 minutes.
It was totally surreal. Because as David said, nobody knew it was happening because all the cars were surreptitiously just put up in the streets. You couldn't advertise the fact to the public. Everybody's waiting for in their positions, ready for their cues. Everything's done over radio, so there's no talking, shouting, or visual. And as David said, suddenly somebody said, roll camera and action, and suddenly the whole world just explodes around you. Cars screaming and crashing and people getting run over. It was pretty surreal.
Very. And so as you look back and you see this film again, you'll look at that and go, how did you do that? Well, we actually did it. That's the answer to that one. And people say, well, what was it like with wolves? Well, I was actually in the cage with wolves. I'll give you just a quick moment about that. It was, how do you, how do wolves, they say, well, you can't really train wolves. He says, oh, really? He says, but they've been fed. I mean, this is really what I was told. So that was actually a set of a cage in which I wake up in the morning wondering, and I'm sure some of you can relate to that, wake up, where the heck was I last night? Well, I woke up and at that point they're going, let the wolves go. So they unleashed these wolves, unhook them, and they just started to walk around. And the last thing I was told was, try not to, no loud noises, no sudden movements. Sure. And so I was just, literally kind of going nice doggy and moving as quickly or slowly, but quickly as I could, like, and that's a one-take situation, too. The set almost came apart as I was trying to exit, but fortunately it didn't, and we got out, and I got out in one take, and wasn't really planning on going back in. The other thing I just wanted to say, you probably had some questions. When it came time to release the film, John, one of the marketing strategies was, how do we tell people that this is a horror film? This is not a John Landis comedy, because a lot of people were going to see, after Animal House and the Blues Brothers, hey, let's go have a few laughs. John Landis has a new show out. So the poster read, from the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. And that was supposedly his warning to audiences that, look, when you come in and you see it, don't expect a lot of laughs. But as you probably recall, the opening sequences, we're out on the moors and Jack and I are talking about, all the kinds of cool things that we did when we were in school. It starts out pretty lighthearted. And as soon as, we're attacked, it turns and stays dark and gory.
It's still one of the most iconic films I think I've worked on. I've done Bond and Superman, Indiana Jones, but the American Werewolf in London I've got fantastic memories of, because as David said, we actually did it. You think of it as a super CG movie, but it's not. It's actually, so much was done for real. Even Rick Baker's stuff, when you look at it, it was so innovative. It was fantastic. And so I've got great memories of that. We actually physically did most of the stuff you see.
All right, so one of the big moments of the film, David, of course, is your initial transformation into the werewolf. What was that sequence like? What was the process like? What was it like filming? How much time and effort went into that just one sequence?
Well, as I had to be reminded by John not too long ago, we finished all the principal photography and they wrapped the film, with one exception. They had the transformation to do at the end. And that wasn't particularly to accommodate anyone but Rick Baker, who needed time. That was what he wanted and asked for at the very beginning. He said, if you want to do a transformation in which you see it happen on film with no effects, no camera effects, and you want to do it in broad daylight inside an apartment, then I'm going to need time and more time. And so they scheduled the transformation at the end, as I said. So they wrapped everybody else but me and Rick and his merry men of a few guys, a few assistants. And we went, and all the pieces, all the appliances, everything was ready. And we shot that over the course of a week, about a 6-day shoot, 10 hours a day in makeup in the morning, like 4 o'clock calls, 4 a.m. Just show up and start, you know. And really the hardest thing after the first day was knowing that I have to come back and do it again the next day. And what Rick was really the hardest thing for him to deal with was after I was gone through the preliminary makeup, the first part were the hands and the stretching hand, and then both hands, and then, you know, lots of yak hair all over my torso, arms, was that there was only so much we could shoot with each stage of this transformation. And so he was, you know, Landis, who is, you know, not sentimental about things. Is that all it does? Okay, that's a wrap. And Rick said, well, no, wait a minute. You know, we've been doing this for months, and I've made them up like for all day, and it's just, well, does the hand do anything else? I mean, that's how John works. And he'd say, no, that's about all it does. Okay, that's it, that's a wrap. You know? And Rick would be like, wow, I thought, you know, more. And then the next day, there'd be another stage where all fours, to the point where there becomes a mechanical, what he called change-o head, where the snout actually shoots out mechanically. And again, another big, long preparation, maybe 45 minutes of shooting that in a few different angles. That's it, wrap. So, and that happened over the course of a week. And, you know, at the end, they cut it together, and it's only, I don't know how long it is, probably 90 seconds, minute and a half. Took a week to shoot, and one I wouldn't like to repeat, particularly because there's a point, you know, where I'm on the floor and I'm looking down at this elongated body, so I'm under the floor, sort of like you see me now. Imagine I'm just doing this, but I'm under the floor for about 5 hours one day. And then, you know, somebody gets the idea of, let's see if he's ticklish. You know, so there's always that you got to deal with.
So, Vic, typically at what point in the production do you come on board? And for something like an American Werewolf in London, how does this compare to, say, like a Bond film, or to Indiana Jones, or any of the other movies that you've done?
They're all pretty much the same. The budget dictates how early you get on the show. This wasn't a huge budget, and I remember we had terrible fights with the production to let us have the 2 weeks of preparation, which nowadays you probably even want more preparation than that. But we fought them, and Alf and myself, and got the 2 weeks of preparation to rehearse the Piccadilly sequence, knowing we'd have one crack at it per night, and the maximum of 2 nights. So if we didn't get it, it wasn't gone. So we probably started on that 6 weeks before we sort of got into shooting it. So we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And as I said, I was the bus driver, and my kids came down, who are now all stunt people. Now I've got 4 kids, they're all doing stunts now. But they came down with their little kids, and we used to have the bus, and I'm rehearsing, throwing the bus, and everybody doing their cues. And at lunchtime, all the stunt guys would climb in the back of the big old red double-decker bus, and we'd go up to the caterers for lunch. And I don't know if you know in England, but a bus driver is one of the sort of, not the lowest of the low, but it's not a really well sought after job. It's one of the first jobs you get if you come and move to England, and it's okay, it'll pay the rent sort of thing. So it's not like you're a rocket scientist or anything. So anyway, all the stunt guys climb in the back of the bus, and the kids stand behind me, and I chauffeur everybody from the rehearsal area up to the caterers. And my kids stood behind me. You know, I've done some stunts over the years, from Indy, jumping on the tank, and all these sorts of things. But my kids just looked at me in awe and went, "Wow, Dad, we didn't know you could drive a bus."
Now, David, your chemistry with Jenny is just, it's one of those, you know, especially for that time period, it's one of the, you know, there's a lot of chemistry between the two of you on screen. What was it like working with her?
It was great. Jenny's, you know, an accomplished actress. I have to tell you, I'm just sort of you know, I was sort of starstruck in a sense, and that's because just a few years earlier, when I was a student studying acting in London that I mentioned, I used to go to we'd go to the theater all the time, and I went to the National Theater to see a production of Equus. Does anybody know that play or familiar with the play? Yeah. I think they also, of course, made a film about it. Well, come to find out, this was at the National Theatre in London, and what they did at the time was they had seats available on stage, which, as an acting student, you go, can you imagine we're going to be on the National Theatre stage? You couldn't bring a program on with you, and you had to agree to be perfectly still. But it was almost like a jury, if you can imagine. It was a semicircle of not chairs, but of benches, that they wanted to have the idea, I think the artistic choice, of actually witnessing what was going on in this play. And so they put seats on stage. So we got seats on stage for the play. The curtain goes up, and there's this amazing play right in front of me. Who happens to be in it? Jenny Agutter. And I didn't even realize it until I went, wait a minute, you're the girl in Equus? I saw that 3 times. And she was, obviously she started as a young age, 15 or 16, very accomplished actress. She was a good sport, which you had to be on this film, particularly because there was mostly guys, and we're doing, a horror film. And John Landis is the kind of director who will play some practical jokes on you. And so you have to be, a real good sport, and she was. So we had a lot of fun.
Now, can both you and Vic and David, can you both talk a little bit about some of the nightmare sequences, the preparation that went into making those, and the work involved with them, such as the Nazi werewolf scene?
Well, and Vic can take it from, I was watching the set burn down, basically. There's a scene, of course, hey, get that, knock at the door, the doorbell scene. It's another nightmare, it's another sequence that you're not sure what's going on. But when it actually came time to doing it, the demon Nazis come in, and along with slitting my throat and blowing the place away, they light fire to the set, and so that was really touch and go. I mean, that was, again, from an actor standpoint, watching the set burn, and at what point are we going to still be able to maintain putting this fire out?
Absolutely. It's, as I say, it wasn't a huge budget film in its day, so a lot of things are limited. We had a limited set, limited space. We shot in Twickenham Studios. And as the Nazi werewolf, you have this mask on. The field of vision is very limited. You're covered in KY jelly, all sorts of stuff like that. We come in, the fire's going. You're relying on other people to cue you if things are getting out of control. At the same time, we're going to kick TV sets in, and in those days, there were obviously the big old TV sets with the capacitors and things on them that somebody said, well, be careful, because when we detonate, because when you kick it, you're probably not going to break it, so the special effects people put detonators on them to blast them, so they do actually break on impact on the kick, timing it in with the kick. They said they do tend to explode a bit, and you're thinking, wow, I hated this mask when they're putting on me, now I'm going to love the thing. And then we think, oh, my eyes, gosh, there's all this glass and spray everywhere. But it's just one of those things that nowadays I think we'd shoot it much differently, and I think the film would suffer because of it. I think that was all that sort of integration with humans into the energy of add to the energy of the film.
And we got to put out the set too. I mean, it didn't burn.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it was a real good fire, if I remember correctly.
So for David, what's your out of all the scenes in the movie? What was the most rewarding scene for you? What's the one that sort of stands out as your favorite moment of the film?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a specific favorite film. Although I thought I was actually going to get arrested when I'm in Trafalgar Square, trying to get arrested, saying things that were sort of blasphemous. And I am in London, but fortunately that was an actor dressed up as a policeman. But sure, you don't know what's really going to happen. We're using real locations. Fortunately, nothing really, dramatic happened, and no, we weren't arrested. It was hard to get in, I have to say, to England to shoot the film in the first place. When John was picking locations, as we have these laws, these labor laws, it was very difficult to get in to shoot, and so they wanted to interview as many British actors as they could for the roles. And all the roles are British actors, and all the crew are all British actors. There are 2 American, actually 3 work permits that they were going after, Rick Baker, Griffin Dunn, and myself. They go, no, I don't think so. I mean, that was the initial reaction John got. I don't know if you knew that, Vic.
I didn't.
No,
That's
it was like,
fantastic.
so what? So he says, you know, I mean, you want me to change the title? And somebody obviously had the common sense to say, okay, maybe we can spare 3 work permits. But you know, there wasn't really a particularly favorite scene of mine.
Now, 32 years later, the movie is even more popular today than it was when it was released. What do you think it is about the film, about the story that resonates and has made the audience for it grow even further than what it was when it first came out?
Well, you know, I would just say the feedback that I get from shows like this, which is kind of fun to come to shows and meet you all personally, many of you, is that it's sort of like it's a first for a lot of people. I mean, in looking back on it now, it's the first time they saw, you know, it introduced them to the genre of horror. And it's a transformation that holds up. And really, basically, it's a story that's also somewhat timeless. You know, in terms of, I always looked at it as a guy with a tragic flaw. You know, a character who has something that he cannot overcome, and that is ultimately going to be his undoing. And that's, you know, a pretty basic story. And that happens in this as well. And, you know, it just, you know, then Blu-ray came along, you know, so, you know, and redigitalized, you know, brought it back. And it doesn't hurt to have one of the most beautiful cities in the world as a backdrop, which also doesn't change and is timeless. So, you know, you can still see the movie now, you know, watch it now. Sure, it's 1981, but a lot of those scenes, of course, you have to know London to know, sure, that maybe Piccadilly's changed and some of those marquees are not the same, but it certainly looks the same in a, you know, general sense. Of course, we don't look the same, but, you know, that's also just part of the game.
We need Rick Baker to work on us now.
Yeah, in reverse.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm going to open up to a couple questions from the audience. Yes, right there in the front.
I think your movie introduced me originally to the definition of black comedy and really what that entails somewhat. And I know as the movie progresses, it gets more out of the comic realm into the more, you know, horrific realm. But I think during the transformation, playing of Creedence Bad Moon Rising was a stroke of genius. And I was wondering if you have any insight into that as far as securing the rights. I know that over the years it's been very famous about John Fogerty and Fantasy Records and lawsuits and everything. So I don't know if John Fogerty himself had any say in being able to say, yeah, you can use my song, or was it a thing with the record label where, yeah, have at it? Do you know anything about that?
I don't personally know. I know that of course, they had to go and get permission to use all the music that they wanted. There was one particular, as the legend has it, that John said that they went to Cat Stevens for Moonshadow. And he said, no, you're not messing with werewolves. No, you can't have the rights to Moonshadow. But okay, thanks, Cat. We'll just move on. That's a true story. Ish, true-ish.
Do we have another question? Yes, right there.
I was at a Marine base when the movie came out, and during the transformation sequence, all these Marines were like hiding their faces and wincing. And I was just wondering, when was the first time you actually saw the effects on film of all your hard work, and what was your reaction?
Well, I went to a screening where I was by myself, which was the first time I saw it. And you know, but really the payoff for me was going in Times Square. We had an opening night, August 1981, with a packed house in Times Square, and watched from the back of the house. You know, the very first time I saw it, I wanted to see, yeah, what did we shoot? Did it work? Did things? And I wasn't very objective. You know, I was sort of taken by it, going, you know, yeah, I didn't find it scary. Of course, I was there. But when we got to Times Square for the opening night, and we actually got to see people leave their seats, the first scare is, well, there are, you know, depending on the attack, of course, is very scary and frightening. But that was sort of a riveting thing from watching the audience, if you can imagine, from the back of the house. But what got him was when Jenny gets up and goes over and opens the curtain, and one of our demons jumps out and stabs her. It's a dream within a dream. That got you. And that was just the most amazing thing, to see people go like that, literally jump out of their seats. And from that experience, I said, I can never go to a screening of anything I've been in before without an audience, because it's not as much fun.
Another question. Yes, right back there in the back.
Yep.
Do you want to?
No.
No.
I found the movie
No, it's pretty much scripted, as scripted. You know, and it's the script that John wrote when he was a young man. It's really pretty amazing in that he shot the film intact. I mean, you know, there are a couple of ad libs that, you know, you think you know are in there. You know, like, it's a cold and a wet out here. I threw that one in, but I said this will never be in the movie. But seeing as how it's 4 in the morning and we're soaking wet out here in, you know, Queens, we're out in Windsor Castle up behind. I said, might as well just throw in something, and that was one that stays. But no, overall, to John's credit, it's a script we shot as is.
I think he wrote a masterpiece. He really did. You know, they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and I worked a few years ago on a werewolf movie that just, you know, has just been done with Emily Blunt and what have you. And when I read the script, I could see the Piccadilly sequence. Though it was a period piece, I could see the Piccadilly sequence in there. I could see lots of things in there, the fire and all that sort of stuff. I actually just did the end sequence, the fight between the werewolves at the end. But I could see all that, and they always, as I said, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and that film has been imitated so much, but has never ever captured it. The same with Ridley Scott with science fiction films. Blade Runner, when you look at Blade Runner, you see every other film that's stolen from it in the past, but never competed as well. And I think that's what John did. He wrote a black humour with drama, with laughter, and a great visual. They're very, very rare to do, those sort of masterpieces.
And one final question from the audience. Anyone? Right there? Yes.
Yeah, I think that American Werewolf 1 is one of the best, creature movies I think ever made. And I just want to know, I guess from both of you, if that movie was made, let's say today, and all those same effects were used CGI, what do you think the legacy of the movie would be had they not used those creature effects and used just the CGI stuff?
For me, I don't think it would be anywhere near as good today because it doesn't have that organic feel to it. I did Starship Troopers, which is like a bridge between the American Werewolf in London techniques to what they do today. Last year or the year before I did Spider-Man, and we tried to go back to basics, all the swinging. We tried to get away from CG because I think CG has made lots of films, but it's also ruined many more. And when you look, that's what we were saying earlier about American Werewolf, there's so much real stuff in there. You believe what you're seeing. You don't come out of the movie and start thinking, oh, it's a video game. So I think if you made it today, you wouldn't make it as well with all the technology. Technology would hurt it, I think.
Touche.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, folks.
David Blunt and Nick Armstrong. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And the next level will be starting shortly. So thank you, everyone.